my legs just had nothing to give. I was working hard, but they just weren't responding. Hello and welcome. Berlin Marathon is creeping ever closer, and there are now just 4 weeks of big training left before the taper starts. It's both exciting and slightly scary. This week was a recovery week, dropping back the mileage before the Newark Half Marathon on Sunday. The week started as all recovery weeks should, with a 24-mile long run that featured 10 miles at marathon pace. Ha, just kidding. As you know if you watched the previous video, I had to move that session to the Monday as an attempt at it on the Saturday had to be abandoned due to stomach issues. It certainly wasn't the ideal start to a recovery week, but my main goal is Berlin, so I felt it was important to prioritise that workout rather than tapering for the half marathon. Tuesday then was the real start to the week, and I kept things super light with just a single 5-mile recovery run. The legs felt fairly good considering the long run the previous day, no doubt partly because I wore the Nike Vaporflies. I'm a big fan of the Vaporflies, and I do think they make me a little faster, but one of the biggest benefits is how they look after your legs. I always feel much better after a big race or workout if I've been wearing them, compared to how trashed my legs would feel if I wore traditional racing flats. However, I only wear them for races and certain big workouts, as wearing them all the time would get very expensive very quickly. I also headed to the physio that afternoon for a sports massage. This is something I've been trying out in this training cycle in a bid to keep the injuries at bay. Thankfully I've no real issues at present, other than the minor aches and niggles you always get during marathon training, touch wood. Wednesday was an easy 10 miles along the canal. The legs felt a little flat as they did last time after I'd had a sports massage, but the pace was okay at 7:22 per mile. Thursday was a recovery double, 5 miles in the morning and 5 miles in the afternoon. The morning run felt good and the heart rate was nice and low. However, the afternoon run was a little odd, although I felt really good. Perhaps the best I've felt on an afternoon recovery for quite some time. The heart rate was really high no matter how slow I tried to run. It was a warm afternoon though, so hopefully it was just that, or a dodgy heart rate reading. On Friday I did an easy run with some strides thrown in a bid to keep the legs sharp. It was a wet and breezy morning, but I felt okay. The legs didn't feel quite as poppy as they did last time I did some strides prior to the Coventry 10k, but they felt okay. I headed up to Newark on the Saturday, as it was a bit too far to drive on Sunday morning. Once I arrived and checked in, I headed out to explore the town on a recovery run. Unfortunately, I got lost a couple of times, as the route I planned on my watch took me over a level crossing that's now permanently shut. However, I eventually managed to find my way, and I enjoyed exploring along the River Trent. It was lovely running along, seeing Newark Castle and all the old industrial buildings that have now been converted into flats and restaurants. This was also my first wear of the Nike Vaporfly Next Percents. They have a very strange upper, sort of plasticky feeling and very thin and light. However, they felt comfortable and my heart rate was nice and low for the pace, which is always a good sign. As is often the case before a race, I didn't get a good night's sleep, but I awoke excited to see what I could do. Unfortunately, it was a pretty breezy morning, with winds around 20 miles per hour and gusts of up to 30. Not ideal running conditions. I ran down to the park where the race starts as my warm-up, and then lined up ready to race. I wasn't really sure exactly what to expect given the weather, but I hoped to at least equal my PB from last year of 1:18:53, which was set in similarly windy conditions at Worthing. That would need a pace of 6:01 per mile. Things started well. We were running into the wind, but with a slight downhill and plenty of people to shield behind, I knocked out the first couple of miles in 5:56 and 5:58. I was feeling pretty good. However, I then got gapped and began to feel the full brunt of the wind. I was probably working a little too hard, and to compound problems, when I took a sip of water at the first aid station, I started to feel a stitch developing. My pace slowly declined as I battled the stitch, the wind, and a few small hills. I went through those miles in 6:13, 6:20 and 6:29, but we'd now tackled the hills, so as we turned so the wind was behind us, I was hopeful I could make that time back up. However, my legs just had nothing to give. I was working hard, but they just weren't responding. I sped up a little thanks to the downhills, but could only muster 6:12 and 6:10 per mile, and it was feeling much tougher than it should have. As we levelled off onto the flat, my paces continued to decline, and any hopes of a PB evaporated. It was clear today was just going to be about finishing. By mile 12, I was down to 6:47 per mile, a pace I'd been knocking out in 20+ mile long runs. I half contemplated giving up or walking it in, but I kept going and finished in 1:23.51, so not even managing the pace I hoped to run a marathon at. Disappointed doesn't even begin to describe how I felt. Looking back now, a few days later, I can see there are plenty of reasons why things didn't go well. The weather obviously didn't help. It was very windy, and I'm tall and light, so it can make things quite tough. With that said, my PB was set in windy conditions, so it can't be blamed entirely. Races just don't always go well sometimes as well, and this was clearly one of those days. I think the biggest factor though is simply not being recovered from that big Monday session, and indeed that week in general. I ran over 118 miles on the 7 days including that Monday long run, and that featured 2 big sessions of 30 by 400 metres and 10 by 1 mile at marathon pace. I didn't feel massively tired or anything, but I clearly just wasn't fresh enough for a big half marathon effort. Last year I ran the same 24 miler with 10 by a mile just before Worthing, so that gave me confidence that I could run well at Newark. However, that workout was a day earlier last year, and I also tapered much more aggressively due to an injury scare, which meant I only ran 30 miles in the week leading up to the race. This time around, I did more than double that. Clearly, in hindsight, I should have ran less, perhaps even taking a day off after the big 24 miler. However, as I was feeling good, I was keen to keep rolling. So, all in all, a race to forget, although I'll try not to forget the lessons I've learned. While it's disappointing not to put in the performance I know I'm in the shape to, ultimately, Berlin is the main goal, so I don't regret doing that workout on the Monday. I'll definitely ensure I taper a lot more aggressively next time though. I know from Worthing last year I can run a great half marathon off the back of heavy training. I just need to make sure I give myself enough time to recover ready for it. I'll now move on to my final 4-week block of training ahead of the 3-week taper. However, given what happened at Newark, I'll keep a close eye on my performance, and I won't be afraid to ease off if things aren't going well. I don't think it's any more than just a bad day, but if it is a sign of deeper fatigue, I know it's better to ease off now rather than plough on and run myself into the ground. Fingers crossed though, I can crack on next week and put Sunday firmly behind me. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel so you can follow my journey towards the Berlin Marathon. And if you have any questions or anything you'd like me to cover in future videos, please let me know in the comments below. Cheers.